Welcome to Conversations in Agriculture. My name is Conrad Weaver, and I'm your host for the program. I am grateful that you have decided to join us today in this conversation. We are going to be having an interesting conversation about irrigation and water and the issues surrounding that with our farmers and agriculture around the world. This program is, I started this program a few months ago to bring the story of the American farmer to the world, to the consumer, to help consumers understand where our food comes from, how it's produced, and how it gets to your table. And so it's exciting for me to have these conversations and talks with people. And today I am joined by my friend Monty Teeter. Monty
Morning.
is from Southwest Kansas. And Monty, are you a native of Southwest Kansas?
I was born and raised in the same town that I live today. So I am a native, 67 years.
Wow. So that is I mean, many people aren't really familiar with Southwest Kansas. What's it like over there in that part of the country?
Well, when you said he's from Southwest Kansas, you made it sound like a bad place, but it's,
No, it's not a
we're,
bad place. It's just an interesting place.
we're very rural here. We're in the very southwest corner of Kansas, and we're about 45 miles from the Oklahoma line and 45 miles from the Colorado line. And in location, we're about 320 miles from Denver, 200 miles from Amarillo, and 240 from Wichita. So we're kind of right in the center of some strategic areas, but it is 100% ag all the way around us.
Yeah, I've been out there several times, and this, as far as you can see, there's farmland and crop circles and just a whole variety of production and agriculture there. What's the primary thing that farmers grow in that part of the country?
Well, we're basically corn, wheat, milo, alfalfa, a lot of triticale, and other forage crops are getting more popular with the dairies that have came in the last 15, 20 years. Uh, and feed yards are still growing here in calf operations. And then we have hog processing and hog uh, businesses here. And then we have a huge ethanol company that's south of us in Liberal, Kansas, and around. But within 75 miles of our area here, I think they process between 15 and 20,000 head of cattle per day, for the meat industry. And
Mm-hmm.
then there's also probably that much more hogs. And then I've been told that we use about 50 to 80 million bushels of corn a year at the ethanol facility.
Wow.
So very uh, a lot of revenues generated from our agricultural crops here in this area.
Wow. Well, if you're joining us on our Facebook pages, feel free to join in the conversation. Leave a comment below, and those will show up on my screen, and we'll give them to Monty as we go through this conversation. Monty, why is irrigation important for today's farmers?
Irrigation, I believe, was originally uh, made available, or people worked hard at trying to use irrigation to ensure they would have a crop. And since that time of trying to ensure a crop just to feed families and cattle and take care of their basic needs, it became an economic factor here in western Kansas, which I can speak more of that than other places. And so there was permits allowing people to drill irrigation wells and be able to develop the farm for irrigation. Here in our area, irrigation means life. If without irrigation, our average corn yield, I think, is about 40 bushel to the acre, if that, if we catch rain on the right year. And with irrigation, there'll be 220 to 250 bushel. So it means everything to be able to irrigate to increase the economic value of our cropland.
Hmm.
So, and I think that's basically around the area. We became so irrigated ground costs so much more. So we have to be able to be more efficient in the irrigation to generate more income to pay for those developments.
Mm-hmm. So, how has irrigation transformed the agriculture community over the past, what, 75, 100 years?
Well, we would just be basically a dry land prairie out here with a lot of cattle and big pastures without the use of irrigation, I believe. There'd still be some dryland irrigation, with the farming techniques that we have for uh, being able to uh, use chemicals and fallow tillage and strip till and other things that have come along. I don't think we'd ever get back to the dirty 30s, but when it's really dry, it would be real limited on crops. It would just be non-existent some years.
Hmm. And so, how has the irrigation technology changed? Probably back in the early days, it was kind of digging ditches and moving water that way. How has that changed over the years?
Yeah, there's we've lived here through those changes. Early on, when people started drilling irrigation wells, they would just basically pump it out on a ditch and then cut out areas on the ditch to water borders in their field. And then aluminum pipe came along where they could lay aluminum pipe out, and they could even go uphill then, to get the areas where they couldn't run the water uphill before. And then they started putting in underground pipeline when plastic and concrete pipeline come around. I guess originally it was concrete pipe, and then plastic pipe came, and they started piping water where they wanted to the high point to flood irrigate through their aluminum pipe. And then pivots started out here in this area in the late 60s, early 70s, and then people would put a pivot on their worst ground. And then as the aquifers have depleted, energy costs got higher, then that made more sense to buy technology, to buy more efficient irrigation. In some cases, flood irrigation would only be 30 or 40% efficient use of the water. And today, pivots are, 70 to 90% efficient use of the water. So technology has developed into more mechanical irrigation.
Mhm. And for those viewers who may be watching who aren't familiar with what a pivot is, it's this big contraption that's out in the field. It has a center point and it spins around in a circle and pulls water out of the ground and then spreads that water across the field. And so when you're flying across the country and you're looking down across Kansas and Nebraska and other places like that, and you'll see these big circles, and that's what creates is created by those pivots. And
Those
so
big
that
green circles from the air,
those
that's
big,
right.
yeah, right, big green circles, and they're not crop circles you put out there by aliens. They're actually crop circles made by farmers, and the center pivots that they put up. Um, so over the years, you've been working in this industry for what 40 years?
Yeah, I actually started when I was 19 working for an irrigation company. And I worked for them 4 years. And then I started my own company in my garage in 77. And since then, we've developed several dealerships throughout southwest Kansas and eastern Colorado. And we've marketed about 3,500 of those center pivots that you talked about throughout our area, plus used and repairs and different things like that. Uh, so we've developed a huge infrastructure. And, uh, when we talked about all the cattle and all the corn and all the dairies, uh, it just revolves around one common denominator, and that's water.
Hmm.
And to make the water more efficient, we have to use different technologies all the time. So, to answer your question, I have been in the business for my own business here for almost 44 years. So we've seen a lot of changes through the area with irrigation and technologies that have come along.
Mhm. What are some of those? What's driving some of those changes? Why are, I mean, farmers are always seeming to adapt to new environments and new things. What's driving the changes in irrigation?
It's an economical value, I believe, for the grower. With all this equipment in a combine, if you notice the price of a combine or a planter or whatever for all this technology, and time you drill a well and put pivots in and irrigation, you get such uh, uh, a, a big dollar sign put out there in front of you, and you've got to get that paid back somehow. It's got to generate some income to repay it. And to the technology, they just have to get more bushels out of every drop, out of every ear of corn that's or every kernel of corn that's planted. Uh, People just have to stretch, pull to get more income. And then when the commodity prices fall, there's less labor the farmers can afford. So they have to have bigger equipment, more technology, more uh, devices such as we use a lot of AgSense, if you want to call it that, on our phones to control our pivots. We have about 3,000 of those units around in our area that we've marketed in. You can start and stop control. You can do variable rate irrigation. You can check the weather. You can reverse. You can turn on fertilizer pumps. You can do everything and manage that pivot from your phone or from your computer rather than having to go out there and spend dollars driving around and seeing what's going on. And if you do have a malfunction, it tells you there's a malfunction, and you can send somebody out there if you don't have time to go fix it. So, I'm not familiar with all the planters and combines, all the technologies there, but variable rate fertilizer, variable rate planting. Uh, it's just incredible what the technology have done. But the farmers just have to get more efficient because they don't have labor. What they used to have 10 or 15 farm hands, they might have three or four. And so
Hmm.
everybody has to do more with less.
And I think that's something that the American consumer probably doesn't really understand the huge cost that's behind producing food. And so farmers are always looking to reduce those costs in every way possible. And I think over and in that part of the country, your part of the country, irrigation is vital for producing crops and producing food. And so with a shrinking water supply, you've come up with some interesting technology to help farmers increase yield, reduce costs, reduce water use. What to explain to our viewers some of that technology that you've come up with?
We've been involved in pivot irrigation, like for about 40, 44 years, and with drip irrigation for over 25 years. And drip irrigation, what I mean is subsurface drip, where you install a drip tubing under the soil and it waters the ground and really increases efficient use of the water. And it takes more management and more people to manage that normally. And with the infrastructure we have with the pivots, it just never has caught on too much. And also with the availability of water and our shrinking water supply, we pump water from the Ogallala aquifer here, and in some cases we find 90% of that water out of the soil already, out of the ground.
Hmm.
I think on the average we've mined 50 to 60% of the water out of our aquifer in our areas. So as we pump that down, we look at what are we doing. I mean, the water's in the ground for some people say 5,000 years, 10,000 years. And then we pump it out of the ground. We invest $150,000 or so, put a well in a pivot, and we pump it out, and we waste it in just a matter of seconds. We waste
Hmm.
20 to 50% of it into the atmosphere.
Because it comes out
So,
and then it's sprayed out on the crops or on the ground, and some of it
right, right,
evaporates. And
right. Yeah. So as I become a first pivot dealer, we had impact heads on top of the pivot that sprayed water up in the air, and we had 1,000, 1,200 gallons a minute. Some people may not know what that is, but that used to be a lot of water. And over time, the wells have depleted. We pump deeper. Uh, for example, my well that I use, it's 600 foot deep, and I have 200 gallons a minute, where it used to be a 1,600 gallon minute well.
wow.
So, uh,
And that's just because there's less water down there for the pumps to bring up.
yeah, in the aquifer, if you think about it, it's just a big bowl of water underground that's in a sand formation, and it just you just pump it down to the bottom of the bowl, and so it takes more for that water to move through the sand because there's less of it to move through the profile. So you have to go deeper, and it takes longer for the water to come into the formation. So you just don't get as much water. And of course, with that, it takes bigger motors to go deeper, and you pump less water in some cases.
So you're
So
talking more cost as well. I mean, it's
yes,
bigger
yes.
motor means more cost, more energy that's
Hmm.
consumed.
And then you get less use of that gallon. I mean, you have less gallons to get use of. Before
Hmm.
you had 1,000 gallon a minute. Today, our average wells in our area are probably 400 or 500 gallons down to 200 gallons. So we're still growing almost. We're growing better crops with less water because of the efficiency we picked up from our pivot irrigators and different nozzling. And then we've over the years, from watching that water evaporate, and watching from overhead sprinklers to we started putting spray nozzles on top of the pivot so we didn't spray the water so far in the wind. We started putting drops on, which we put a 180-degree loop on top of the pipe and directed the water down to the ground with a pipe that was at the bottom of the trussing on the pivot, 8 foot or 9 foot off the ground. Then we brought them down to 3 foot off the ground. And then we used different nozzles to get better patterns or bubblers to get the water more directly on the soil. But once it leaves that nozzle, we lose, I don't want to say we lose control of where that water goes. So after studying that and being involved with pivots and drip irrigation, if we could just come up with a dripper line that would drag on the ground behind the pivot, get all the water on the ground and get used to the water, then it would be a pretty good product. And so I started working on that about 9 years ago to develop Dragonline, what we have today.
Well, we can show a little video of how that works. I'm going to bring this up here. Let's see here.
There you go.
So here's the top part of the frame. Here is the part of the actually, these drops here are the old sprinklers, right?
Yeah, those are the feeder lines that originally came down off the pivot, and then we put a manifold across with a cable assembly that's about 4 foot off the ground. And if they raise taller crops, and we adapt to that. But this is for a shorter crop. These are actually soybeans. And if you click that, you can kind of see how we're able to bring that water down to precise application. This allows us to pre-water in a strip, to plant in that strip, to germinate in that strip. And then as the crop grows, we've developed a winch system, which I think you'll show here in a little bit. Then we can move that hose over 6 inches or whatever we need to continue to irrigate without hurting the plant. So we bring precision irrigation to precision farming. We need to plant in a circle. We can precisely apply the water. This picture that you're showing is out in an alfalfa field, and it just shows the water dripping out of the emitters. That's what it looks like in the field. Those are a 2 gallon per hour emitter, so they're 10 times larger than traditional drip irrigation tubing that goes in the ground. Our tubing's made by the Jane Corporation, which is very, very efficient. This is a system running on potatoes over in South Africa. They've had such trouble of trying to keep water on their plants and to cut down on wheel tracks. And this waters potatoes exactly precisely down the row. This farmer cut his water use 45%, chemical use 40%, and energy 50% on this particular system. And that's one thing we didn't talk about, in the efficiency of new technology. When you get better use of the water, you cut out expense. And for the South African farmer, their electrical expense is 24 to 27 cents per kilowatt, where ours is 3 to 8 and 10 here. So it's incredible. They have less price for their market, and their energy cost is 3 times more. It's really terrible.
Wow. And I know they've been in a terrible drought down there in South Africa.
Yeah, they've got some rain this year. They're getting off to a better start than they've had in a long time. So everybody's pretty happy about that this year.
Well, that's good. That's good. So you've been able to sell this system to farmers in South Africa and other places around the world as well, right?
Yeah, it's really incredible. When I first started developing the product, I just thought I was wanting to save our aquifer in our area here. And, for some reason, everybody wants to see it work and see if there's going to be any cost share for it, who's going to pay for it, or if there's going to be cost share. But when you go to other countries, they don't have any subsidies, and they have to make every drop count now. They can't wait for somebody else to do something else because they've already stretched everything they can. And so it's really evolved. We've just sent new systems to Australia this month. We sent 3 more systems to Saudi Arabia. We've got 2 systems in Sudan, and Of course, South Africa has been huge for us. They've put in probably 100 pivots the last year with our technology, and they're all saving tremendous amounts of water and growing good crops.
I know you've done some research with was it Kansas State or University of Kansas? You did some research with them, and what did you guys discover? How much water are you able to save compared to traditional sprinkler irrigation?
I think if uh, the tough thing about the Kansas State testing, which boy they've done a good job. Uh, the last 3 years they got rain,
Hmm.
and so when you're trying to prove a product better, and if you're getting more rain than you need, it's hard to say the differences.
Right.
But Jonathan Angulera has done an awful good job at Kansas State, and then Isaiah Kaseka was there before him, which he's out at UC Davis down in California doing testing with Dragonline out there. But they showed a 35% difference in evaporative loss with Dragonline versus traditional nozzles 3 foot off the ground.
Hmm.
So it was a big savings.
Hmm.
And then in crop yield, there was quite a bit difference in crop yields. The less water we used, the bigger the yields were. And so this year, we're looking forward to a year that uh, don't want anybody to take it wrong, but when it's dry weather, then we really show up good what we can do. And so hopefully we'll have good results this year,
Hmm.
more so than when it's wet out.
And they're talking, I think, and you and I were talking earlier how I've heard the word mega drought is being kind of bantered around that we're potentially in a mega drought, in the western U.S. What I mean that those are really challenging times for people in agriculture to have
Oh,
those kind of conditions.
yeah, it is. When you were going around doing the thirsty land, we were in a bad drought, and then we kind of come out of the drought. And once you come out of the drought, people forget how dry it ever got. It seems like, or I hope it doesn't come back, or we're in a different cycle. But we've just been in a terrible dry cycle here, and the weather's been windy and hot every day. And I suppose every day this week we've had 30 to 40 mile an hour winds, gusting to
Mm,
50 sometimes,
wow.
and it just dries out everything. And we had good rains last spring, and it just stopped probably mid-July, middle of August in areas. It just hasn't rained or got any uh, water of any measurable amount at any one time. Although we do show getting 5 or 6 inches of moisture, it comes at such a slow amount, it doesn't register very good with the crops or the soil for the holding capacity. But it's big. We get calls from Arizona now that we used to not get calls. It's really dry there again. We just shipped 4 systems to Oregon. They're just
Mm,
extra. They're really dry out there in a drought,
mm,
and there's California's getting dry again.
mm.
So just
But
huge area.
California doesn't use a whole lot of center pivot technology in their fields, right? Because they have
No,
different types of crops.
no. We look to that market though. For us, that uh, everybody's accustomed to knowing how drip irrigation works,
Mm,
and if they could ever catch on to the benefits of pivot irrigation with the technology they have to control the pivot, I just have a vision that people will install pivots for drip irrigation so they
mm,
can have more flexibility for cropping and the use of the water. And if
mm,
they need to move it, they can move it to another field rather than all the investment not getting anything back.
mm.
So I believe there'll be more pivots put in for that reason, and the pivots there will adapt to our technology as soon as we get more training and get people on the ground.
Hmm. Yeah, I've been on some of them farms in the Central Valley there in California, outside of Fresno, and just some of their drip systems. They use a lot of subsurface drip in that area. But then you have problems with rodents and other things like that that kind of chew up your pipes and things like that. Where do you have that kind of issue with something with your system?
We can, and we have, but it's real minor when I say that. Now, if you talk to the farmers that never have had drip irrigation and they've always had pivots and never had trouble with mice, they would say, "Oh, well, we got a lot of trouble." They might have 10 leaks out there, where a subsurface drip guy he might have 200 leaks out there to dig up and fix. Where you with Dragonline, you go out and you can see the leak, you can cut it out, and you can put a piece in, and as long as you're irrigating, you don't have trouble with rodents. It's
Hmm.
when you shut off and it lays out in the stubble that rodents will sense that moisture or the water inside that tube, and so they bite on it. Now we've made our tubing thicker now. which resist most rodents. But then you have a coyote or a badger or something
Mhm.
that can chew on it. So bigger varmints chew on it. But you can. It takes probably 2 hours, two men going through a system and tie it up and bundle it up to itself along that manifold with some zip ties. And then when you start irrigating, just cut those off, let it fall down, and walk the sprinkler forward, and they straighten themselves out. So if they do that, it's almost non-existent for damage with rodents.
Mhm. So, um, what do you think is the future of irrigation? I mean, as we go forward, there's less and less water available for use like this. There's environmental concerns, from different groups, and there's things like that and we have a growing population and less land to use. Um, and then with growing droughts around not only here in the U.S. but around the world. I know a few years ago Australia had a horrible drought, and what is the future in irrigation for producing food?
But you and I talked a little earlier before we got on the program about COVID-19 and the impact it's made on lots of areas and people and the way we do business. And I would just encourage everyone that's listening today on the program or as it's viewed to call a farmer and thank him for feeding them during this time, because there wasn't one day he missed work, and he worked every day, and he kept irrigating and kept growing crops, not knowing anything about the future, kept bringing food to your table. But it is a good question, Conrad. In the future, if you read how much the population is going to grow in the next 30 to 50 years, it's going to double. And that means we're going to have twice as much food. And then as people develop their cultures, they eat better. They eat better varieties of food. So they're going to eat more. And then we look at our natural water supply, or fresh water supply that we're using for irrigation. It's shrinking every day. So we're going to be expected to raise twice the food with less than half the water, or with less water than we have today, which we're going to go twice as much with half the water, basically what it amounts to. So we will have to be more efficient than we ever have been. Every drop of water will have to count, and we just won't be wasting any water at all. We'll use affluent water like they do in Israel. I think they only use 10% of fresh water for irrigation. Everything else comes from affluent water.
Which is
So
basically like recycled and reprocessed
recycled
to.
water, yeah,
Mhm.
recycled, reprocessed water, and we'll just have to get there uh, uh, to maintain food supply. And
Mhm.
you give the American farmer a reason to grow more crop, to be more efficient, and give him a price that he can make a little bit of money. It'll be amazing what he'll do.
Mhm.
So I have no doubt that we'll be able to accomplish that when the time arises. Everybody talks about it, so everybody tools up for it, and then nothing happens. So
Yeah.
we just have to get to that point here.
You know what I'm always amazed at in looking at the technology you have is that the that drip is down there on the surface. It can go right into the ground, right? And I remember walking in the fields there where you had a test site and seeing the difference. You had one section of the pivot was under sprinkler irrigation, the other section was under drip, and under the sprinkler it was already dry, behind it, and under your drip line, your dragon line, it was the moisture was there, and it was um, being absorbed by those plants rather than just being evaporated into the air, which is pretty amazing. And you can physically see it that it's working.
If you have a huge amount of gallons, you're just going to flood everything. But when we start managing water and use less gallons, then you see the difference even greater. If you were out in my field and we had 1,000 gallons a minute, and we were doing either one, you couldn't tell the difference probably. But when you get less use of or less water, then the differences really show up. I know you had a few slides there of our new hybrid system that we've worked on
Right.
earlier. You might share that if you would, please. There's a picture. Yeah, this picture here. Uh, This just shows a traditional, or not the traditional, but our new hybrid system. We stretch a cable from tower to tower, and then we put a winch system at each end of this, and we'll show a picture of that here in a moment. And then we connect a manifold to the row spacing that the farmer wants. We can move that uh, manifold laterally to water right next to the plant, or we can move it away from it. And this is what the winch looks like at each tower. You would just loosen one side and tighten one side, and you'd move that whole assembly over 2 inches or 6 inches or 12 inches, whatever you might want. So it brings that precision water, like you say, that precision water right to the surface. And so this has been a huge advantage as we develop Dragonline. Other things come along, and farmers say, "Why? How can you do this? How can you do that?" Just like on this picture of the uh, potatoes, you can precisely put that water where you want to now, rather than watering out in the rows, watering the wheel tracks. We haven't talked about the wheel tracks. Actually, we eliminate wheel tracks. The systems walk on dry ground. There's no, you're never wetting that wheel track there. You can kind of see that wheel track is,
So
it's not slipping, so you have
here you
more
have these big
efficiency.
wheels that
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, and some of those I remember being in a field in Idaho a few years ago, working on the wheat harvest film, and it was all irrigated, all center pivot irrigated, and I fell into one of them wheel tracks, and it was
Yeah.
probably 2, 3 feet deep.
Well, they can
And
get deep,
mm,
and they're extra wear and tear on the pivots. The pivots are slipping and sliding, so the efficiency of making that circle is not. You're just guessing how fast you can make a circle because it's slipping all the time. So with Dragonline, those stay dry. With dripping on the soil surface rather than flooding the soil surface, we eliminate compaction of melting all those clods together. We keep the clods on the soil to help cut down on wind erosion. So we keep the soil more mellow. We actually start softening the soil with our system versus if you use a nozzle system. So this is a good picture here. The middle of the soil stays mellow. We're not compacting it. It stays dry. And then if you do catch a rain, you have a natural reservoir to hold the rain. Rather than everything being wet right after an irrigation, you still have a reservoir to hold the rain if you do get a rain. And it cuts down on uh, the weed uh, population because you're not germinating weeds all the time on those areas. And also to fertilize, we haven't touched on that. You can run your liquid fertilizer through your Dragonline and deliver it right to the source rather than on the leaves or the wind. And farmers have told me they've been saving 15 to 20% on their fertilizer because they're not wasting it like they were, and they get better use of it. So that's another advantage.
so really, it's a system to be more efficient, to save our natural resource of water, and to save money for the farmer, and ultimately down the road potentially save the cost of that food on the shelf in the grocery store.
Yeah, it's energy too. I mean, some systems require 30 psi to 40 to run. We just need 10 psi at the end of the system for our system to operate properly. We have pressure compensating emitters, and what that means is once we reach 10 pounds at the end of the system, every emitter on that farm, and there could be 20 to 50,000 emitters out there, but they're all putting out precisely the same water. Our flow variation on our emitters now that the Jane Corporation has made for us, there's less than 2% flow variation from 8 pounds or 8 psi pressure to 65 psi. So as you go up and down hills, undulating terrains, you can actually now control the amount of water that's applied to the field in precise application.
Hmm. I can just see how this would just really transform agriculture in so many different ways that can really make it more efficient and grow, like you said, more food with less.
You're reading my words on my sign behind me. Transforming pivot irrigation through drip technology. That's our belief. We want to transform systems to be more efficient. It's our mission, and every piece of our literature we've printed for years is to make every drop of water count, and that's what our passion is to do that.
So what sectors of agriculture are investing in your technology? Who's buying it?
It's more people that are short of water at this time. They've already tried other things, and this is almost last resort. And another realm of people that are looking at it, people that have drip irrigation and they have pivots, and they know how much more efficient drip is than traditional pivot irrigation. So they're adapting more quickly uh, to that because they already understand. One thing we didn't touch on was filtration. It is a drip system, so you have to filter the water to a certain state, not as much as subsurface drip, but you still have to filter out any impurities because the way the emitters are made on the tubing, there's not one thing that should ever uh, plug up or be not working on that emitter tape for many, many, many years. I mean, it, there's just nothing to wear out on it. But if you get it contaminated or plugged, then it'll quit working. So if you have good filtration, the drip tubing is, we believe it's a 12 to 15-year product in the field without any issue. But we have to have good filtration. So to get someone that's never messed with filtration to filter now, it's a learning curve, and it just takes a bit of time for them to learn about it. But the grower that's already doing drip irrigation, he understands filtration, and it's second nature to him. And then when we tell him we have a 2 gallon hour emitter versus a 0.2 gallon an hour emitter, so oh, that's huge. We won't have any plugging, and that they have a whole different mindset of working with pivot guys that have a big hole for a nozzle versus a little tiny hole that we have to protect.
Hmm.
So the adaptation comes from people with drip irrigation experience. In South Africa, it was we had one gentleman that's our main distributor there now. Uh, he had 57 irrigation wells on his farm along a river, and the aquifer has gone down so much that he was only using 7. And those 7 only allowed him to irrigate 180 hectares of ground, and he used to water 1,200 hectares.
Hmm.
And through that time, they went from pivots and they went to surface drip irrigation. And then he was having 100 to 150 people out there helping move drip irrigation every day. And he called me about a year and a half ago and said, "Can you really drag that drip behind pivots?" I said, "Yes." And he came over and looked at it and went back home. And he's converting all his land back to pivots now and putting drip on it. And he's using 100 less people to manage his farm now. And he's watered 600 hectares with the same water. So we gave him new life in his farm.
Wow. That's transforming. That's transformative for someone like that who's now providing food for his community and for his country.
Yeah, he's ordered 3 containers so far in a year and a half, almost $1 million worth of product, just from making a trip over here and seeing for himself that we could do it, and it's really transformed the 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 area that he's in.
Hmm. So, what's the future in irrigation? I mean, down looking forward 20, 30 years, what's it going to be looking like then? And for agriculture for that matter. I mean, what's the future look like?
Well, we've talked of being able to. We're going to have to go twice as much food with less water, and probably where there's water, there'll be a more uh, demand for farming in those areas. I've always felt that throughout the United States, we need to have some type of international water pact, just like we have interstate highways. We need to have an interstate water system. So areas where have a lot of water, we can transport that water to areas that don't have water to grow more food. And there's always lots of talks about that, and everybody says we can't afford that. But there's a point we cannot afford not to do it
Hmm.
because of the impact it makes on our economy and taking care of our people. Uh, but it doesn't make any sense to let all that water run to the ocean. If we could just take a little bit of it and revamp our aquifer here in western Kansas, or we cover 8 states here with our aquifer, so it's not just a Kansas aquifer. It goes under 8 states that are joining us here,
Yeah.
or 7 other states. So What
It's
is the
amazing
future?
it's amazing what governments can do when they have to. I was watching a little documentary last night about New Orleans after Katrina, and how the Army Corps of Engineers is now building this massive gate system and pumping state, one of the biggest pumping stations in the
Yeah.
world, to be able to protect the city. I mean, it cost probably billions of dollars, and but they only did that after this big catastrophe. And
Yes. Yeah.
so, what's it going to take for us to realize that, when the Mississippi River floods, when the Missouri River floods, when, other places, when the Red River up in North Dakota floods, what are we going to do with that water? What's going to take before we can say, hey, we can take that water and deliver it to parts of the country that is dry?
Yeah. It's Governor Brownback of Kansas had a 50-year water vision, and in that vision, he was promoting to put an aqueduct from Kansas City to western Kansas to come out to Kendall, Kansas, basically. Uh, about 350 or 400 miles of aqueduct and putting some reservoirs along the way. And we would just take the water above flood stage out of the Missouri River. And to do that, we could bring enough water out here to help regenerate our whole area here, that just rather than wasting it downstream. But it was about I think at the time when it first started years ago talking about it, it was about a $3 billion project. Now it's a $12 billion
Hmm.
project. And then when you see what we do when COVID comes along, we just give out trillions of dollars. It could have been just a little drop of that would have cured basically all of our problems out here and kept our infrastructure in place. So I think we just really have to get serious about an infrastructure for interstate or water being moved to interstates.
Yeah.
That'd be
And
part of the
for
future.
our farmers and people working in agriculture, it's important to look forward to the future, to realize that, water is a finite resource, and we need to be able to take care of that and to use it precisely, use it judiciously, so that, 50 years from now, when there's twice as many people walking on the earth, that there's enough water to grow the food that we need. And so I think it's important for farmers to look today at the future and to prepare for that.
Very much so. There's so much we can do to save water. When you say one of our hydrologists here for our aquifer one day said if we could save 25% of our water today, our aquifer would last 35 years longer. It's so easy to save 25% of the water to be more efficient with it. Just not watering on a windy day would be a big deal. All the water we waste. And as we think about what we can do to save that water, it'd be easy to save that to make our aquifer last longer. But I guess one reason we do more exporting is there's a value of the water. Here, the value is not there. The In our state, the government, the state of Kansas owns the water, and we have a right to pump it. And just whatever that cost is getting it out of the ground, basically is our cost. And then we put the infrastructure into place. But in other places where they just don't have any more water, it's really a big value to them for every drop. And so I guess, what will change in the way we look at things in the future is when the water becomes valuable, then we'll do more with it. It's just human nature to, uh, when you're out of something, to uh, try to take care of it better. It's kind of like, I think, uh, one of our past presidents said, I think Benjamin Franklin said, when the well is dry, we'll know the worth of water.
Hmm.
And I think that's just where we're at. When the well is dry, we'll understand, oh, well, we should have done something. But we have to look to the future and save water today.
Hmm. I remember when I was working on my film Thirsty Land, and we were in the Central Valley, California, just a little south of Fresno, and I interviewed this lady who she and her husband woke up one morning and went to brush their teeth and turned on the spigot, and there was no water. And for the next year or so, they literally had to put water, go to town with their pickup truck, put water in these barrels, bring them home, dump them in this thing to pump it into the house just to flush a toilet. And so that value of that water just exponentially increased.
Yes, yes,
That
yeah, yeah. And that's what we'll look at. It's just how do we get more value out of that water? Yeah, that's a bad experience when you turn on the faucet and there's nothing there. And that's right. When the well is dry, we'll understand the value of that water.
yeah. Yeah, and so I think what you are doing and what many farmers are doing is working to conserve the water they use to be able to grow the crops that they need to grow, so that
Mhm.
you and I can eat and have a healthy diet. And I think what you have come up with is just really I'm amazed by it, and so I'm fascinated by that, and congratulations on that. And I wish you that you would much success and that more people would look into it and to check out what you guys are doing. Where can people contact you? How can they reach out to you if they're interested in learning more?
Our website is www.dragonline.net, uh, and it's DRAGONLINE, like the dragon, uh, .net. And there it has information for our website. Uh, it has our phone numbers to contact us. So we'd be happy to share with people our experience and to direct them to what we think would work for them on their farm. Some people just aren't the mindset they're going to take care of it or do something different. And some people want to make that change. And so we want to work with those people that want to make those changes.
Yeah, and I think it's important to have that kind of mindset of forward looking and looking at the future. I think that's important for everyone to do, including those of us who aren't in agriculture. After spending a couple of years working on that film project, I changed some of my habits, even little things like being more careful at turning off the water when I brush my teeth, and just little things like that to realize that,
Of course,
you
yeah.
know, every drop that goes down the sink, goes down the drain, is gone for a long time and not available for us for drinking and for cooking and for other things.
That fresh water is getting shrinking more all the time. It's just exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what's the next big thing for Dragonline? What are you guys working on? What's going to be the next big thing for you guys?
Developing new products to make Dragonline work more efficient. The winch system that we shared with you, it's a game changer. Uh, Out here in western Kansas, this spring we pre-irrigated our soils, and then we planted seeds, and then the top got dry. And then we would go out there and we'd try to put on a half inch of water to germinate that crop. And with low limited wells, it may take 4 days to put that water on. And by the time the sprinkler gets very far, it's already dry and needs another drink. And with the Dragonline, with the winch system, you can wet that little strip of soil, uh, 6 inches wide, let's say, and 8 or 10 inches deep. And there's moisture there to keep that seed wet, and it germinates so much faster. On my farm, it germinated 3 days sooner than where we had the spray nozzles going. And that jumps out of the ground and gets a better start, and then it has moisture there to keep it going. And and I'm and in some of the calculations we've done, we feel that we're saving 80% of the water we normally would have applied to germinate that crop. And then once you get it started, then you can move it over and water next to it, put your fertilizers on, to ensure the crop as it grows. Uh, so,
Mhm.
uh, uh, you know, I, I think the improvements that we see as we go along, listening to farmers, the development of Dragonline came along from an idea. It took 3 years to get a manufacturer to make tubing for me, and I had to buy it to get it done. So we're changing the whole culture, the way people irrigate. We're not pivot irrigators. We're not drip irrigation. We're mobile drip irrigation. And so
Mhm.
it's a whole technology, a whole different mindset that we're trying to change the culture of the way people are already farming. So they're all waiting to see, well, how does it work? And we have a lot of researchers say, well, we need to research that a little bit more. We're in, I think, 16 different universities and research centers testing Dragonline. They've
Mhm.
tested drip irrigation for 30 or 40 years. They've tested pivots for 30 or 40 years. And we're just marrying those two technologies together. We're getting the efficient use of drip irrigation with the economic and ease of using a pivot and marrying those two together. So to answer your question, to do more things in the future, we're just going to try to be more efficient with the water, to try to help farmers. How can we develop Dragonline to grow better crops and listen to them and say, well, I'm on this spacing. How can you do that? Well, we're developing a dual winch system now that you'll actually have two manifolds out there. So you can water behind each other or beside each other, or you can move them apart. So you can water 15-inch spacing or 30-inch spacing with the same
Mm.
system just by changing the winch system. So we're just, as farmers say, well, how can we do this? What about this? What about that? We just try to develop something to fit them. We've got to get to the more of the implementation stage than our implementation stage and development all the time. But as long as we can develop and grow and keep enough money for R&D, we'll keep doing that. But we're making a difference. We're trying to change the culture of the way people irrigate.
Hmm. Well, I want to applaud you for your work and for your innovation and for just taking that really risk and saying, hey, let's change this. Let's look at it in a new way. And I think that's the kind of the American farming spirit. Just looking at the history of farming in America, they've always been innovating, and I think you're on the front end of that. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for doing the work you're doing, so that the rest of us can have something good to eat and can have a
Yeah, well,
secure
thank
food
you,
source.
thank you. Yeah, we
So,
we were we've been humbled in some of the awards that we received, for the things that we're doing, but we didn't do it for the awards. We're doing it as a to be a better steward of the natural resource that we have. I think uh, God had a reason that Monty wasn't just a pivot dealer out here for 44 years. What are you going to do with that? And we believe that that's a big basis. It's not just being a pivot dealer, but it's to share with the world how to grow more with less and make every drop of water count. So I appreciate being on your show and to be able to share about Dragonline. I hope that we can help other people to do the same and to buy into our passion and our mission that we have in life.
hmm. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the program and sharing your story and the resources that you have, and hopefully people will go check it out if they're a farmer and they have a center pivot system and they're interested in that. They can go to the dragonline.net is the
Correct?
website
Yep.
and check it out. And so I do appreciate you coming on today and taking time out of your busy schedule to participate in this. I want to share with everyone before we sign off here another interview that I have coming up in actually next week, and I'm going to see if I can get this on the screen here. I have Peter McCormick, the executive director of the Dougherty Water for Food Global Institute, is going to be on next Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Central. And we're going to be talking about the global issues with water and food and how what's happening around the world in water conservation and in irrigation and those kind of related things. So please join us next Thursday for that compelling conversation. So today I've had Monty Teeter on with Dragonline. Monty, thank you again for joining us,
Thank you very
and
much. Appreciate all you
for this
do.
talk. It's always been good to connect with you and to reconnect with you. And from our first film, and actually, if you're watching this and you're curious about the movie Thirsty Land, if you sign up for our emails, you can get a free copy of that film delivered to you online. And so, if you go to our website, which is the American Farm Network, and I'll put this banner up here so you can see it. Go to AmericanFarmNetwork.com and you can sign up on there for our emails, and I'll send you a free coupon code for a free view of Thirsty Land, and you'll see some bits and pieces of Monty's work in there as well. So, Monty, again, thank you for joining us today, and looking forward to hearing more about Dragonline and what you guys are doing around the world.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
And thanks everybody for watching and for participating. Please, if you enjoyed this, please share it with your network and let them know that we are having these conversations in agriculture right here on the American Farm Network. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll talk to you again soon.